I got another message while we're here, sitting here recording. Yes.
Let me guess. It was on Slack.
Yes. First of all, I didn't even know that you could pause your Slack notifications. That was life changing when I figured that out. But I'm just so tired of all these messages. It's like overload. I get email, Slack, and some people don't even know what Slack is. Did you know that? I told somebody
Yeah,
like,
I
"Oh,"
know.
they're like, "What's Slack?" I'm like, "That is my lifeline. What are you talking
Yeah.
about?" So if you don't know, Slack is kind of a like a messaging app, sort of like Google Chat or anything like that. And so Yaz and I have actually been trying to challenge ourselves to turn off our Slack notifications and email after hours and the weekend. So how did it go for you, Yaz?
Well, pretty poorly.
Oh.
Um, Last week, I was working on an article where I was interviewing a lot of people based in Bali, which meant that, Bali's 12 hours ahead from New York. And I was interviewing a lot of people at like 6 or 7 in the morning or like 11 or, 11 p.m. or 1 a.m., which meant that inevitably I was also on Slack. Now, I'm someone who's usually pretty anxious about turning off my notifications. A lot of the time, I found that I'm more anxious about not replying to something, thinking I've received a message and haven't replied than I am just like seeing a notification, replying to it in the moment.
Hmm.
But I feel like you're pretty different from
Yeah,
me.
for me, I definitely have hard set boundaries. Like I log on at 9 a.m., I log off at 5 p.m., and I just don't look at it until the morning.
I respect that.
Sometimes things have come in after hours. Like let's say I log off at 5 and I get a message at 6. If I'm still around and I see the message, I will reply. But if I log off at 5 and head to the gym, I'm not replying to you. I'm at the gym. I can't. But I get what you mean about the anxiety because as a younger employee, I do feel like I always have to answer people. I don't want people to think that I'm just, especially working from home, nobody's watching me. We've talked about how our work is autonomous. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want people to think I'm just hanging out watching TV. So I do try to answer messages pretty quickly. I answer messages as soon as I get them, really. But other than that, I would say after hours, I don't even look at my email or Slack at all, if possible. And another thing that I've noticed is I get less emails because I am more of a junior employee. A lot of people aren't emailing me, I guess.
Wow. Well,
Is
I
that the
remember
same for you or no?
absolutely not.
Oh.
I remember you said that last week you took a mental health day, and I'm curious how that went for you.
Well, I did take the mental health day, but I don't know why I thought it would just be a day with no office communication. That's not the case. People did message me even on my day off. I was a little annoyed because I felt like when somebody announces that they are taking a day off, you should respect that and not message them or just wait until later. I don't know. Things are different now that we're working from home. It used to be like, oh, Christina didn't show up in the office today. She's out of office, which means we're not going to bother her, you know? But
Mm-hmm.
now it's kind of like that always on type thing. Like, even though technically I'm taking an off day, I could just be sitting at home watching TV, but it's my off day, you know? And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the lines have kind of been blurred. And I'm guilty of this too. I kind of did this 2 weeks ago, so never mind. Let me take that back. For example, I messaged someone and she replied, "Oh, I'm actually off sick today." But she replied, so I kind of pushed it a little further, like, "Okay, well, since you're here, can you answer this one question?" And I guess
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't really respectful of me either, so. But the difference is when I'm off, I'm not replying. You
Mm-hmm.
replied, therefore, I'm going to assume you can talk.
Yeah. I feel like that's like a work snowball, right? So you log in to reply to one thing, you sign in, you're like, I'm just going to get this one email out. And then you end up doing 10 things because you're online and people are asking you questions. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
But what it means is you're never off. Like anytime I'm even scrolling through Twitter, I'm like, is this a story? Like, is this something we should follow up on?
Yeah.
And I find it very difficult to separate those two as a result. I think you love painting, which is different from being on social media. And
Yeah.
there's
That's
like,
my only break, really.
yeah.
Yeah.
We will talk to Julia Herbst, who edits the work life section, about maintaining a healthy work life balance, setting healthy boundaries, and, she'll also share some advice and positive solutions.
Awesome.
Hey, Julia, how's it going?
Hey, it's
Hi.
going great. How are you?
I want to, well, I'm good, but I want to talk to you a little bit about this whole work-life balance thing. And to start up, I have kind of a philosophical question for you
Oh
because
boy.
I feel
Okay.
I feel like you're a pretty, philosophical person. Um, what is work-life balance? How would you define it?
Yeah, I feel like there's sort of been a move away from the term work-life balance recently, towards the idea of work-life integration. And I say this
Ooh.
sitting on the couch with my dog chewing a bone in the background, in case anyone is wondering. Um, yeah, with the idea that, our lives are, probably about a third of them are spent working, sometimes more for some of us. So the idea that work and life are separate is sort of an antiquated idea, right? And especially, I think, with the move to remote work, a lot of us are feeling that integration more than ever. I think in some ways that's a really great thing. And in other ways, that can be really problematic and challenging for folks. So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting time to be talking about work life balance.
What's it been like for you during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a real danger for a lot of us, who are lucky enough to be able to work from our homes and couches, as I am right now. There's a danger of having to feel like you're sort of half working all the time. And so
Hmm.
I've been trying at least to, put some more boundaries than maybe I had before. And I think a lot of us are also dealing with the idea of burnout. I think it's a lot harder when you're isolated, you're not seeing friends and family. There's not kind of the like work hard, play hard thing happening. So yeah, I've been trying to kind of keep those boundaries a little clearer than they were maybe previously to the pandemic. I think that's been going okay for me personally, but it's definitely like an intentional thing, and I think it also has a lot to do with where you're working and how
Hmm.
your coworkers and your managers and other people in your lives are sort of treating those boundaries too.
Yeah, one thing that you said about, we kind of feel like we have to show a little bit more face virtually now because when we used to come into the office, people could see Christina came in at 10, Christina left at 6.
Mm-hmm.
Now nobody really knows what time I logged on, what time I logged off. And I was telling Yaz that there seems to be a little bit added pressure being young, being a woman, and being a person of color. So, can
Mm-hmm.
you just talk about how this whole always being on type thing is kind of adding more pressure to different demographics?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There is like sort of a desire to be performing that you're working. And,
Exactly.
I think a lot of it depends on the manager, but some managers sort of expect that, they want to know that like it's, 9:05 and I know where Christina is or whatever.
Hmm.
And so
Well,
I think
luckily,
there,
our company's not tracking us because some
yes,
companies do
exactly.
that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in fast company in general, there's a lot of trust and kind of
Hmm.
built-in understanding that you get what you need to get done. But I do think that that is a real danger, especially for women, especially for people of color, for any sort of marginalized group to be kind of showing that you're being professional, showing that you're, getting it done. I think there's definitely a trend, especially in some tech companies that we've been reporting on and kind of checking in with about kind of a move toward results and not the number of hours you work. So if you can get all your work done in 5 hours, and maybe it doesn't matter that those hours are from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. or whatever, it can be more of a performance based. And I think that there's a lot of desire for that, especially for knowledge workers to move away from 9 to 5. Are you sitting in a chair somewhere, even if it's not your office?
I
I
think a
like the
lot
sound
of
of that.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of what you said sort of comes back to like a company culture. You know what I mean? Like a lot of that comes from bosses, right? Telling you like
Mm-hmm.
if you get it done, that's fine. But on our end, as we're sort of like more junior employees, what are the things that like I or Christina just shouldn't be doing? How can we set boundaries on our time?
Yeah, so I think you're right that a lot of it is about company culture and about sort of what those expectations are because you can have the best boundaries personally in your life, but if your manager doesn't respect those and is, on Slack at 2 a.m. expecting you to reply, that doesn't really
Yeah.
work. But assuming that your company, is respectful of those things, I think then in that case, there are a lot of things that you have to do to just kind of check in on yourself. One thing that's been good for me is just sort of setting those boundaries and then realizing like, things don't fall apart like
Hmm.
when like you don't always have to reply to that email that you get at 9 p.m. Like it will still be there in the morning. And a lot of that I think is sort of anxiety related and, wanting to feel like you're on top of things at work. And so some of it I think is sort of just experiencing that maybe, and seeing that things do work out okay. Occasionally there's going to be some fire that has to get put out, right, in a non-work hour, but most of the time, the things in your inbox can probably wait until the morning. And so I think practicing that is really important. I think part of that comes down to managing your notifications. Like maybe you don't need to have your Slack on all the time. Maybe at 6 p.m. the notifications stop and you just train yourself not to look until the next day. One thing that's been really helpful for me too is sort of having a end of work ritual. So for me, now that I have this dog, it's going on a walk. And she's actually been really great for helping with work-life boundaries. Just having a dog that's like, hello, I'm here also. Maybe go outside, walk around the block, spend some time, that sort of thing can be helpful. I think if you're living with other folks, you have roommates, if you have, a partner or kids, then that can also be helpful, setting sort of clear expectations, like I'm going to be working from 9 to 5, but then after that, let's go on a walk, let's play this game, let's do something that is sort of marks the end of the day every day and helps you kind of shift, because there isn't that commute or whatever you used to have where you kind of transitioned between your working professional self and your personal everyday self. So I think that can be helpful too.
Yeah, another thing that people tend to forget about is midday breaks. You don't have to just get everything done at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. So can you give us some advice about taking breaks during the day?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's really good is what I was sort of saying about having a schedule. And so a schedule should also include lunch or some sort of break.
Yeah.
I think, it is in some ways a lot easier than it ever has been to go take a lunchtime, stroll or something like that. When you're working in a big office building like we used to, it felt kind of like you were in there and then that was sort of it.
Yeah.
You have to ride an elevator, that sort of thing. But here it's a lot easier to sort of set those boundaries. So I think it's sort of going in, at the beginning of the day, being like, I'm going to be online for these hours. Like, this is when I'd like to take a break in between my meetings or whatever. So you have sort of a plan. And then, I think it can feel really great to do a load of laundry or, call a friend, do something that, you normally might not be able to do during your time, because it is a big luxury to have sort of that integration that I was talking about before.
And also, one more question about breaks. I've seen some teams create their own Slack channels to just notify each other, like, hey, I'm stepping away from my computer, be right back. Okay, I'm back now. Do you think that's too much information, or do you think that's respectful of your team?
I mean, I think it depends on sort of what your dynamic is. If you have a team of 50 people, maybe that's too much for everyone to be messaging. I feel like that's when a Slack status can be very helpful. I try to use them pretty proactively, and a lot of people on my team do too. It's not perfect, obviously. People will still sometimes message you and not see it, or just expect you to see it when you get back or something. But yeah, if I do step away from my desk, I do try to change my status to say quick break, back in 30, or doctor's appointment, something like that. I think that can be useful.
The thing that I struggle with most in terms of taking breaks is actually, you mentioned kind of the opportunity to maybe go for a walk at lunch, but I'll try and sandwich things in. So I'll be like, I'm going to walk while I'm on this call or while I'm, in this meeting where I need to listen, but I don't necessarily need to say anything. And it kind of feels counterproductive. You know what I mean?
Like if you're going to take a break, take a real break.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe be realistic about sort of what you can get done in that break time, Sometimes multitasking can be good, but if you've been doing it all day, or, they say that, one of the most exhausting parts of work is sort of all the switching back and forth we do, when you're on Slack and then you get an email and someone, you're in a meeting and someone is messaging you about something else, like that can be very fatiguing for your brain. So I feel like if you're actually, if you're actually going to use the time as a break, then maybe try to use it as a break, which doesn't involve doing 9 things at once, but maybe just a walk with no music or podcasts or anything, which sounds crazy these days.
To kind of go back to what you said about integration, you say that that could be a good thing, but I think that might be unhealthy. I don't want my work to bleed too much into my life. I mean, I understand we basically are our careers. Like I'm trying to become a career woman. Yeah.
Sure.
And so I don't
it's
want
one
to be, I don't want to be one of those people that my whole life is just my job, you know? So that's why I'm just a little worried about the whole integration thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe a better way to think about it would be like integration with limits or with boundaries, right? Like,
Okay.
so there's some flexibility, hopefully, at a lot of people's workplaces, when they're working remotely, that maybe, they're going to a doctor's appointment with their kid, or maybe they're doing a lot of laundry, but they're roughly reachable between these hours. But yeah, when those hours are over, work can't be integrated into, every aspect of your life. And I think it's still very important, especially during the pandemic and when things are stressful and overwhelming, that there are still limits on that time. Because I think if you try to half work all the time, you're not going to get anything done. Like, it really is a productivity thing ultimately. Like, you need time off, you need breaks. All of those things help you be more productive and feel better about what you're doing when you're at work, And so I think companies should respect that and understand that if they want the best out of their employees, they need to give them off time too. And the same goes with vacations. I think more and more research supports the idea that vacations are important, and vacations have to be time when you're not on Slack every 10 minutes either.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about saying no to things. So, beyond just switching off after work, it's like Casey in a recording that he made for us said this was kind of his year of saying no. So if there was an assignment that he felt like he couldn't take on or might be too much, he just turned it down. I personally have a lot of trouble doing that. And I'm curious. I'm curious whether you have any strategies, I guess, for kind of doing it. You know what I mean? I feel like as a junior employee, there's so much pressure on you to kind of prove yourself.
Pick up the slack and take advantages of opportunities. Yeah, it's something I definitely struggle with too. But I think Casey's right. Like, you have to say no to some things. You're going to end up doing a lot of stuff you don't want to do, and that's not really helpful for your career and will just burn you out. So I do think that's really important. I think probably just checking in about sort of what your priorities are, right? And that can be hard to do when it's in the heat of the moment and somebody messages you and you're like, yeah, I can totally do that. That's far away. I'll figure it out when it happens. Or like, I want to be helpful. I want to be a team player. And those are all good things. And, that can be a priority depending on what your goals are. But I think continually checking in about, like, is this something that's going to be helpful? Like, is this something that I'm the best person to do? Or in some cases, maybe you're not. And maybe by saying yes to that thing, you're depriving somebody else of having the chance to do it. So I think it's important to kind of take that extra moment and reflect and think, like, okay, what do I have on my plate? Is this a good use of my time? Are there other people who could help? Like, what's realistic? And, I think in that way you can sort of balance your desire to help out and take on new opportunities with your desire also to, maintain some sense of control and, have a reasonable workload.
Christina's in kind of a unique situation, and she can certainly describe it better than I can, but she's someone who, her team is short-staffed at the moment. And she's had to take on a lot of extra responsibilities in addition to her own. And Christina, I'd love to hear from you how you're handling all that and how you're setting boundaries. And then I'd love to hear some kind of tips from Julia as well.
Yeah, so with my team, I basically am the only person on my team right now. We're normally a team of 3, and so we're down. And I have noticed that before all this, I used to be able to log on at 9, log off at 5. Now I'm working till 6:30, 7 o'clock. And for me, I guess my thought process is, okay, if I start earlier, I'll finish earlier. So I have been logging on a little bit earlier to try to get things done. But as Julia said, I kind of just see it as I'm a team player and it's not going to be like this forever. We'll hire somebody soon. And I don't want to complain too much. But people have asked me, hey, are you okay? And I say no. I say I've become more vocal because I was forced to be. I've been telling people, hey, I cannot do this. I need help. And it's really hard for me to ask for help because I guess I'm a prideful person. I want to save face and let everybody think that I can handle it on my own. But I finally had to speak up for myself and said, no, I need help.
Yeah, that's great. That's really important. I mean, you hit on a lot of the things that I was going to mention. I think definitely, like, you have to be realistic about, what you can do. It's one thing when it's, in this case, it's a short-term problem. Obviously, more people will be hired. And, there are times, obviously, in everyone's work life where you just have longer, days when you're on deadline and that sort of thing. But I think it really is important to let people, managers especially, know, when it's too much. And I think also when people offer to help, like figuring out what they can do to take things off your plate, it can be hard, as you say, like you want to say, I can do all of it, and you probably can, but like, should you, like just because you can do a thing doesn't mean that it's the best thing for you to do. And I do think that there are a lot of people who want to help, and if you give them kind of the tools, something manageable that they could do, then they'd love to step in and sort of support you. So it's great you're asking.
It kind of goes back to Laura's voice message that she shared with us about, she said, unless you're a 6-figure CEO, you don't need to be stressed about answering messages at a certain time. And I definitely have realized, okay, I'm the social media producer. If one tweet doesn't go out, it's not the end of the world. Like I've just had to put it in perspective for myself that my work is important, but the company's not going to go under if I don't get everything done today.
Right. Yeah, no, that's definitely something that I've been trying to, when I said like you sort of try it and see, I think that's like a really important thing. Like, okay, I waited until 9 a.m. to reply to this Slack, where the person said, wait till tomorrow to reply to this Slack. Like it wasn't a time sensitive thing. They just wanted to send it then, when that happens and you realize that like, it's fine, nothing happened, it's all okay. That's an important lesson. And yeah, I mean, obviously we're in the news business, all of us to some degree. So there is a sense of sort of urgency and timeliness that happens, but that doesn't mean that that's the case for every sort of Slack or message or email that you get after hours, right? Like everything is not an emergency. And I think especially in sort of the pandemic brain and thinking that way, everything can feel like an emergency. Everything can feel like if I don't reply right now, they're going to think I'm not committed to my job, or, I don't know, however your anxiety sort of manifests personally. But yeah, I think it is sort of about checking in with yourself and being like, okay, do I need to deal with this now? Sometimes for me, I'm like, okay, if I spend 2 minutes doing this, then it can just be sort of off my plate and out of my mind. And I think in those instances, then maybe it is worth dealing with sometimes if it clears up mental space for you not to have to think about it, then sometimes that's okay. But if it's going to be like, you have to pull out your computer and sit down for an hour to figure something out that you could just as well do the next day, then, maybe that's the thing that waits.
All right, Julia, well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.